Good morning, and it's time to read another chapter out of my book. Because of the time change, still wearing these sunglasses, so a little bit different than normal. I am really excited about today because we are at one of the more weird, interesting chapters, chapter 5, The Flood of Everything Weird. It was fun to be able to, when this book had originally come out, to go on some podcasts and talk about some of the weird ideas that I talk about in the book. This is the one that probably got the most attention. Just because I'm showing you, you see, it's one of the interesting things. I don't know if you can see it there, but the Chinese character for flood, you see how it breaks down to vessel, 8, and mouths for people. So I thought that was kind of weird and interesting, but so let's read. Chapter 5. I can no longer save you from your Bible. It's a quote from Michael Heiser. And Michael Heiser is one of those Bible teachers that definitely will change the way you look at things. I would say him and Rob Bell really kind of were two people in my life that helped me look at things a little bit differently in the Bible. And so the second person that I mentioned, Rob Bell, I don't know where I'm anathema and where I'm considered to be on the good team. The landscape is so confusing in churchy world that I just gave up trying to navigate it. And that's a Rob Bell quote. All right. And it happened when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bore children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination of and the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and every creepeth thing, the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Are you ready for something different? If you are still reading, I assume you are as well. But you're ready for something different. This chapter will not let you down, I promise. Some of this might be old news, some might be new. All I can say, if you really understand this, you will never look at God the way you used to again. You are in for a ride, my friend. And now for another weird scripture. And you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. They will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to one another, as iron does not mix with clay. Daniel 2:43. So who are the they that will mingle with the seed of men? And if they are mingling with humans, are they not human? Not human. It is a good question, but first a warning. Reader, please note, this chapter is not for the faint of heart. If you are just looking for a nice fresh look on Genesis, you might not be in for this. You might not be ready to face some very, very strange Bible passages, history, and a possible change to your overall theology that is listed here. You might want to skip this chapter. I wanted to put this one at the end so I don't lose you here in the story, but it is a story told long before you and me, so its placement in Genesis is on purpose. You have been warned. Here are some good questions I hope to answer here. Why did God, who is so loving, full of mercy, grace, and patience, destroy the world of people he created except Noah and his family in the flood? That's a good question. Why did God command in the books of Deuteronomy and Joshua to destroy nations of people? And in 2 Samuel 8:2, why would God tell David to have the Moabites lay on the ground and measure them? Who would live and who would be executed? All this would turn the hearts of most if they were not blinded by religious brainwashing. These folks must have deserved it, right? And then there's Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, yes, it is the evil city whose name created a taboo sex act, a city of gay people, as some Christians have proclaimed. I would disagree. These are two cities Abraham had helped in battle, where his nephew Lot made his home, and according to the story, ready for some heavenly fire and brimstone. God shows up with two angels one day at Abraham's tent. He tells Abraham he is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. The words used here are harsh. He sent angels to see if the outcry was legit and the cities were done entirely. This, meaning all humans, the whole city, gave themselves over to evil. Abraham pleads for the cities down to 10 who have acted righteously. What was the law in a pre-law world? That's a good question. What does a pre-law world mean? The problem sometimes with Genesis, people will assume the law written hundreds of years later applies here. So what does this mean if the law has not been given yet? Jude 1:7 says they went after strange flesh in Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel says they committed abominations. While the angels were in town, the people of the town wanted to have sex with them. Now, that is out of place, very strange. Most people's responses to seeing an angel in the Bible was fear or reverence. But here you have two whole towns looking for some angelic action. Was this the abominations and the strange flesh, the courting of the angelic type? Maybe we all need to cover our heads and listen up. That's a reference to 1 Corinthians 11:10. Are angels and humans getting it on? I thought this was about the flood, Jason. What happened? I know this is getting a little strange. I know there have been many ways people have looked at the passages at the beginning of Genesis 6. Athanasius made it illegal to do what I'm doing now. I also know some have condemned the idea of human-angel relations, but remember, this is a story, start to finish, and the story is going somewhere. If we are going to believe one supernatural act in a story, we can't discount the others. As weird as it sounds, it says what it says. From our last chapter, we discussed Satan and the rebellion. This chapter is about another rebellion. This is where a group of angels decided to take matters into their own hands and attack the seed of the woman. Remember that from Genesis. It says in Genesis 3:15, there will be enmity between her seed and the seed of the serpent or the Nakish. Your seed and her seed will have enmity. The serpent or Nakish's seed. What does this mean except the offspring of the rebel angels? So let's go back to the story. To talk about Noah and the flood, we need to first start with Enoch. The first Enoch was Cain's firstborn. Yes, Cain had an Enoch first. And Cain built a city and named it Enoch. I'm not going to get into that here, but there is something there. The Enoch we want to talk about was the seventh from Adam, who walked with God and was no more because God took him at 365 years. That is the same number of days of a complete solar year, but let's stick to the story. Jude 1:14 calls him a prophet. What is a prophet? It is someone who speaks against something evil at the time. And what does this mean in Genesis? He was speaking against something. He was sent to stand up to a horrible evil that began to slowly take over the earth. Behold the Lord with myriads of his holy angels. Behold the Lord came with myriads of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all and convict all the ungodly of all their ungodly deeds, which they have done in an ungodly way, of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Where did Jude find this quote? I don't know if you're ready for this one. Most say it came from another book called the Book of Enoch. Sadly, that's talked about so much more, but when I wrote this, it wasn't as popular. Now it's way more popular, which is cool. The problem is that we don't have the original text. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church includes a book in their Bible called the Book of Enoch, but there's a lot of inconsistencies in it to use it as a good reference. Scholars agree that though it spoke of the sin, it spoke of the sin in the pre-flood world of Genesis 6, It was a common book used historically during the Old Testament time. Enoch spoke against the Watchers, who left their assignment to watch and protect man to procreate with beautiful women. This could be where Jude found this prophecy. In the book of 1 Enoch, it states, 200 angels take an oath to descend to Mount Hermon, find women to marry, and have children with them. That was 1 Enoch 6, 7, and 8. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 Enoch 6, 7 through 8 lists the names of the leaders of these angels. Wait, Jason, Bible writers used other books not in the Bible to write the Bible? Yes. If this is a surprise to you, I'm sorry to rip off the Band-Aid by surprise. Yes, Jude quotes the apocryphal book not in the Bible about God's judgment on fallen angels and their offspring. Enoch was an interesting character. What does it say in this book? In chapters 7 and 8, the angels make good on their oath and take women as wives. They teach humans magical medicines, incantations, the cutting of roots, and about plants. And the origin of folk medicine is therefore ascribed to these angelic beings. The children of these angels are giants, standing 300 cubits and improbable 450 feet tall. These giants eat so much food, the humans cannot feed them anymore. The giants proceed to eat humans, as well as all other kinds of animals. The text notes especially that they drank the blood of the animals, sinning against them. In the biblical flood story, the Noahic covenant includes a command about consuming blood. 1 Enoch 7 through 8 is a reflection upon this command, which was probably given because the pre-world flood, I always hate that word. The pre-world flood did in fact consume blood. Okay, that's, I quoted Philip Long, who was a scholar. In Hebrews 11:5, it says Enoch did not see death. Side note, Methuselah was the oldest man recorded in the Bible, and his father outlived him. Where did the writer of Hebrews get this information? How did she, I love how I always throw in that the writer of Hebrews was a woman, how did she know Enoch did not see death just from the passage in Genesis that says God took him? The scripture also says he pleased God. We have a story of an ancient prophet, Enoch, who possibly spoke against the evil of the pre-flood world until God took him away. He named his son Methuselah, which some interpret his name to mean his death shall bring an end. Each name in Noah's genealogy has an interesting meaning that makes a statement. Here is the breakdown from Adam to Noah. Adam, man. I kind of break it down right here. You can see it. Adam, man. Seth, appointed. Enosh, mortal. Kenan, sorrow. Mahalalel, the blessed of God. Jared shall come down. Enoch, teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, despairing. Noah, comfort and rest. So man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring despairing, comfort and death, or comfort and rest. As you can see, there is always more when you look into the original language. So Enoch the prophet named his son a prophecy. Let's do the math. Lamech was Noah's father. He was born to Methuselah when he was 187. Noah was born to Lamech when he was 182. The flood came when Noah was 600. Okay, add this up. 600 plus 182 plus 187 is 969 years. Methuselah lived 969 years, right up to the year of the flood. Then in Genesis 7:4 it says, "For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth." Where the 7 days, the days of mourning after Methuselah died, and then the end comes. Now, I try to show this in this chapter, how much the writers of Genesis were telling a story, and all of these different beats tie into that story. And it's like, if you're not paying attention and you're trying to make it into something it never was, then you're going to miss all of these story beats. And it's so interesting because you can go layer upon layer upon layer, and you find more and more and more just in the first book in the Bible, just how many layers there are and how much it ties to these other books and these other histories and these other things that went on. It's pretty amazing, and I love it. And it's sad that so many Christians have been taught a version of it that strips away the story, and they try to make it into like a science book or a history book, and they miss that it's this amazing story that was written by storytellers with all of these extra little things thrown in that are telling a bigger story that they would have never known at their time, that then refers to Jesus. And that's what makes it so awesome. Remember that. That was a little extra that I'm giving you that's not in the book. Okay. Now let's go to Genesis 6:1 to follow this story, which says, Men began to multiply, and the daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful. First, who were the sons of God? Ben Ha Elohim. Some interpret this to mean the line of Seth, and a few others strange sexist females are evil garbage. Yeah, because some interpret this to mean the line of Seth, and a few other strange sexist females are evil garbage. Plus, what was strange with the daughters of Seth, that they were so ugly. Yeah, that's funny. I'm trying to say basically why I'm saying it this way. This became popular in Christianity because a few church fathers were embarrassed by the supernatural strangeness of the Bible. I was saying, what was the problem with Seth's daughters? That they were ugly. Like, why couldn't it, if the sons of God were the line of Seth, why did they not just marry the daughters of Seth? But they were ugly. The only ones that were beautiful were the daughters of men, which they interpret as the line of Cain, which it doesn't make any sense. This became popular in Christianity because a few church fathers were embarrassed by the supernatural strangeness of the Bible. And the resurrection of a dead guy is not. You can look it up if you like, too boring for me to go into and does not fit into the story. The ancient rabbis and other Hebrew schools have interpreted this to mean angels are created spiritual beings of God. The earliest sources interpret this as a divine sort. The Greek Septuagint, the Old Testament interpretation in Greek, interprets this phrase as angels. All references found from the 3rd century BC onward have interpreted this phrase as angels, including extra biblical sources found in the Dead Sea Scrolls like Enoch, the Genesis Apocryphon, and Josephus, the Roman historian from Jewish history. In the Apocryphal Genesis, a book that included additional information on top of the normal Genesis story, includes a situation where Lamech, Noah's father, thinks that Noah was a product of Lamech's wife cheating on him with the sons of heaven. Also, let's look at a story laid out from the beginning. Please follow me on this rabbit trail that should make a little more sense of this. The serpent knew his head would be crushed by the seed of a woman. To stop this from happening, what did he do? First, when Eve gave birth to her first child, she thought this would be the one that ended the curse. Satan stepped in and tempted Cain to kill Abel, hopefully corrupting the seed. But this wasn't it. But if Satan's seed is mixed with the seed of the woman, this would corrupt the entire world's population of the sons of Adam and possibly stop the head crushing that is to come. If you follow this through the entire Old Testament, you see Satan's attack becoming more focused each time. After the flood, God told Abraham he would give his descendants the land of Canaan. Then, when they went to Egypt, the Pharaoh enslaved them and killed their children. Satan had 400 years to fill Canaan with his seed. And remember, Joshua said there were Nephilim in the land. Until Joshua and the Israelites destroyed almost all the inhabitants. And they left one area, which you find out was where Goliath was from, Gad. Then you have David and how David anointed him to have his descendants rule forever. So Satan sent his seed, the last of the Canaanite giants, after him. David destroyed them. Then you see all through the history of his lineage, all his children being killed. That one will be saved by a servant or something else miraculous. Then you have Jesus being born. Satan once again attacked by having all the two-year-old children killed by Herod. Once Jesus was baptized, Satan became more focused in his attack on Jesus by potential stoning, being thrown off a cliff, supernatural storms that professional fishermen were afraid of, and then finally the cross. Satan thought he won and finally stopped the seed from crushing his head, but he found out he was wrong when Jesus rose from the dead on the 3rd day. This part right here, in literally like one big paragraph, I can explain the story of redemption from Genesis all the way through by showing that was the whole point of all of it. And it's amazing to think, first of all, and this is one of the questions, you get this as a side note too. We'll say, well, doesn't the devil know he's not going to win? Well, yeah, I don't think any of these evil creatures believe that they're going to beat God. God is God. But they can push off judgment. I think that's the plan. And they did all of these things to try to push off what God wanted to do. They knew in the end they were done. I mean, like I said, angels aren't there. They were with God. They're not stupid. So they knew that their destruction was coming. They just tried to push it off. And Satan thought he can mess with the whole plan by doing all these different things all through the Bible. You see it. And that's what I kind of break down here, where children are always targeted as trying to be murdered or killed because Satan knew that there was going to be a child that was going to be born that was going to crush his head. But he messed up, and Jesus rose from the dead and won. So now let's get back to Genesis 6. Genesis 6:1 says, men began to multiply, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful or pleasurable. The word is tob, which could mean to bring pleasure. Did the angels see how much pleasure the women brought the men and wanted to get in on some of this action? In Genesis 6:3, God saw this and gave 120 years for men to stop them and repent. In Genesis 6:2, now remember, man was given authority over the earth. So God wanted man to stop this because they were the ones that had authority. So he gave them 120 years to stop and to repent. In Genesis 2, we see that they were tob, the same word God used after creating in the first chapter. Then Adam said this about Eve, that she was tob. They took wives, and it's lakik, I can't say the word right in Hebrew. Took, but used in Genesis 2 when referring to how God created created Eve from Adam. Took a rib or bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She was taken out of man. Then in Genesis 3, when God said Adam will return to the dust, taken was used more often than the concept of marriage. So it's one of those weird things where if you take that word and look at all the different places it was used in a lot of different weird kind of ways. Wives, or Isha one, together, are not just in wife or marriage sense. Interesting to point out, this idea is a common word structure for a normal giving into marriage concept of the time. Men would give their daughters to be married. It was not just the women who were taking part in this sin. The men were involved too. So the men would give their daughters to the sons of heaven, or these fallen angels, because they wanted to be part of this whole thing they were doing. So did they have sex in a human way? And that's where it gets weird. So in Genesis 4:1, speaking of Adam and Eve reproducing, the word is yadath, a euphemism for sex, or to know. The words used in Genesis 6:4, the mechanism used to create the Nephilim, were different. It didn't have to be physical like as we know it, or it could be. It could also be non-consensual. It could be celebrated due to the power, prestige, and wealth this position would allow somebody. But I don't know, it's a mystery. You don't know. In Jude 6, angels left their house or their habitation, as referred to as a type of body, used only one other time in this word to leave their habitation or their house. In Greek, it's used only one other time in Corinthians 5:2, speaking of believers longing to be clothed in our heavenly house or habitation or body. The angels who sinned left their heavenly bodies. Then verse 7 says, even as, meaning it ties to verse 6, saying that Sodom and Gomorrah went after strange flesh. Heteros sarex, not used anywhere else like this. To interpret the Bible by the Bible, what does it say? Genesis 19 says that when the angels showed up there, the people wanted to have sex with them. In 2 Peter 2:2, angels that sinned were bound to the earth awaiting judgment. It's interesting that 1 Peter 3 says Jesus went and preached to the imprisoned spirits who were disobedient when God waited patiently in the days of Noah. In Genesis 6:4, the word used for giants is gigantes. In the Greek Septuagint, it means earthborn. Not just giants referring to the gods that it's not just giants, it's referring to the gods that were earthborn to the gods. Hercules, Atlas, and such. They would be the Nephilim mentioned here. This also explains a lot of the old folklore concerning giants, dragons, and the such. It might be men of old, demigods, clash of the titans, evil rebels of a divine council. Wait, are you saying other mythologies, including Greek, could be based on truth? For something to be a myth, it does not have to be untrue. Myth is the retelling of an event. Let me tell you a personal one of mine. Before I was a Christian, I had to take my wife to the hospital. Before I was a Christian, I had to take my wife to the hospital. She was 4 months pregnant and having symptoms of something serious. Even though I did not believe, I felt something inside of me pulling on my heartstrings to pray. So when I went to the hospital bathroom and prayed, there's nothing complex, simply save my baby. When I returned, I found out my baby was all right. This was a miracle. I could see it in the doctor's face. This myth caused me to follow Christ and name my baby, my firstborn, Isaiah, since it means the Lord saves. The Lord saved my baby and me. Now all these events took place. This is a retelling the retelling is what made it a myth. These Nephilim would have had the genetics of the sons of God and men in some way. They could have had knowledge that was passed to them by their angelic fathers, which could explain some of the ancient alien technology enigmas that people get caught up on. But they corrupted the earth. Maybe in jealousy, they devoured the men and took the women. Maybe they continued to procreate with women and ultimately corrupt the entire earth. Maybe the gene pool of humanity was corrupted, the attack on the seed. So in Genesis 6:3, God gave humans 120 years to stop. This might tie into some of the extra biblical books like Enoch. An interesting side note, in the Gospel of Matthew, there is a parable Jesus gave in chapter 13, 24 through 30. Interestingly, there is a complete manuscript found in Old Hebrew, not the common language of the Greek of that time. The passage in Hebrew says, "While the sons of Adam slept, the enemy sowed his seed." Then we get to Noah. His father named him this because he hoped he would bring rest from this curse. Noah rests from this curse. Now Noah took up where Enoch left off. One thing needs to be pointed out about Noah you don't find listed anywhere else in the Bible referring to people. His genealogy was unblemished, perfect. Genesis 6:9. This is the first time something like this was used. Without blemish, this was used 44 times, referring to the state an animal should be in before it's sacrificed. Was Noah the last person living that has not had his gene pool corrupted by the fallen angels and the Nephilim? From this scripture, I would say yes. Noah found grace. This is the first time mentioned in the Bible, grace from the curse. Noah and his family were the only ones left not corrupted by this. His family was the only ones left that were fully human. God did not destroy man he created. The Nephilim and the angels were destroyed. To get the full picture, we must go back to Genesis 3. The promise God gave Eve was that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. So how could the serpent keep his head from being crushed? Attack the seed. I will put an enmity between you. Genesis 3 mentions 2 seeds. Now, you could interpret this to mean women and snakes don't get along, but you missed the point. The serpent, Satan, the fallen angel, was created by God as a cherub who protects. After the fall, he convinced 1/3 of all the angels to follow him in this rebellion. Some of these angels came down and took wives, either had sex or did something else, and created these Nephilim. Jude says they left their heavenly bodies. There's the same Greek word used to describe our future heavenly resurrected body. So Satan attacks the seed and creates these hybrid creatures that Genesis says they were great tyrants. Genesis says the whole earth was corrupt. They even corrupted the animals. God has to start over. With Noah, Here was one of those genes that did not have the Nephilim flaw, perfect in his generations, in his genealogy. God destroyed all the rest of the world with the flood to protect the promised seed and stop the corruption of these fallen angels, stop the corruption that these fallen angels had brought to the earth. Strange, I know, but still in the Bible. And here's a good question to ask. Did someone tell them it was wrong? In Genesis 6:5, humans had become corrupt. They had corrupted the entire earth, animals, plants, etc. In Genesis 6:6, he was grieved that he had made man to be devoured In Genesis 6:6, he was grieved he had made man to be devoured, as they were by the evil fallen angels. It seemed like the devil was winning. In Genesis 6:7, God needed to restart since man's seed had become corrupt. In Genesis 6:8 through 9, grace's first place was written. So grace was written the first time. Noah had a perfect genealogy, untainted by the Nephilim, unblemished. In Genesis 6:12 says all flesh had become corrupt except Noah. All flesh was corrupted by the fallen angels. In Genesis 6:13 it says, God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I will destroy them with the earth. Gigantes, earthborn. Read that again, the end of all flesh. No other human was left uncorrupted by the fallen angels. God tells Noah to make an ark. So maybe God never destroyed humans in the flood or any other event that has been misinterpreted in the Bible. Maybe these scriptures that talk about genocide have nothing to do with humans. It makes more sense with the story, the history, the original language, and the overall understanding of God. Is he a genocidal tyrant, or is he protecting his children and creation? I see a loving God protecting his children and the seed that would eventually save them. These judgments were on the fallen angels and their seed. The flood and baptism. The flood is also represented in the ceremony of baptism, the washing of water to renew the world from the stains of evil. God started over with the pure, unblemished line of Noah. The water washed away the hell that Satan had created. It was a clean start in a new world. What happened to these creatures? The waters destroyed their physical bodies, but their spirits were bound to the earth. I believe these are the demons responsible for possessions and such you see in the New Testament. They long to be back in a body. Peter says Jesus preached to them after he died. Interesting. Side note, it's interesting that in some of those extra biblical books, like the Book of Enoch, it refers to them as bastard spirits. The New Testament refers to them as unclean spirits. The word unclean meaning, the tainted genes. So I think that the world that Jesus lived in believed that the demons, these evil creatures that we're running into, were the spirits left of the Nephilim after the flood destroyed their bodies. Okay, so I can see, and this is just looking at extra biblical books of the time, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and just people, that's the way that they looked at those things. But that's why you have, and here's another little addition that you're going to get from another book, where the demons, when they see Jesus, they say, Son of David. Remember, David was the one that finished off the job when it came to the Nephilim. He killed the last of the giants. A lot of people believed, from that time frame, that a son of David would have the power over the evil spirits because he was a descendant of David, and David was the one chosen to finish off the world of all the Nephilim. All right, total side trail. You can look that stuff up. I don't want to go much more in because I'm still reading. And we're already 35 minutes in. Okay. So what happened to these creatures? Okay. I can also see them responsible for various paranormal events, including ghosts and the such. I do not believe Christians should be afraid of these things because you have the Spirit of the Most High in you. God, John said, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. These spirits are demons that have been on the earth for so long and can easily act like they are someone else, like a dead relative or another historic figure. As spirits, they still have access to a spiritual dimension or frequencies, so they can appear as some have described as ghosts. The Bible speaks of them as familiar spirits. So how did the Nephilim show up later? I think Sodom and Gomorrah answers that question. People allowed them in again. I do not see an unrighteous God that is wanton about violence and destruction, destroying the world over Seth's kids sleeping with Cain's daughters. I do not believe this is a God who destroys cities and commands his servants to commit genocide and horrible acts of violence. Why? This scripture says it. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. God, that's Genesis 6:6. God deeply cares about you, no matter what you are involved in, even if you are pimping out to angels, stealing the secrets of heaven, or just being an overall jerk. God still wants to save you and find a way to bring you back. Even beyond death, Jesus went and preached to those who were judged in the flood. The attack on the seed continued, but became more precise. God told Abraham in 400 years his descendants would inhabit Canaan. That gave Satan 400 years to fill it up with giants. So here's my opinion of the story. First, the fallen angels, divine beings, could all have had their own agenda, but Satan used this to help his cause. The first wave saw the outcome after the flood. The next wave was specific attacks throughout the history of Israel. I believe after Jesus dethroned Satan at the cross and resurrection, his enemies do not have the same access as before. I think Satan has had to become more cunning, or Satan just has a new plan that is taking time. So aliens, right? Quantum physics has brought about quantum computers that exploit extra dimensions to add computing power. The multi-universe concepts are becoming more of a scientific norm than science fiction. String theory introduced the idea of extra dimensions within our own. Some we do not inhabit but are available, like tuning a radio to a new frequency. We have strange alien abductions. A large amount could be hoax, but not all, that speak of these strange beings doing reproductive experiments on humans. It's very strange. Jesus said, "As in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man." It is strange, right? There are tons of history about these strange giants around the world. What are they? A resurgence of the Nephilim? As the days of Noah, some have said, like the flood, the day came by surprise. So will Jesus' coming be. But the flood was not a surprise. God told Noah exactly when. Also, 2 Peter 2:5 says Noah was a preacher. He preached against what was happening, including God's warning of 120 years. Then there's 7 days of mourning for Grandpa. What did Jesus mean? Would the pre-flood world of the craziness of Noah return? Eating and drinking and giving in marriage. Let's go back to Daniel 2 and the statue. You could see a 64-foot version of it in Las Vegas. I'm not getting into the specifics of the dream, the kingdoms and the such, just the last part, the feet that hold the whole statue up. They will mingle with the seeds of men. We have these strange stories of alien abductions and sightings. Most are hoaxes and maybe disinformation. But the part that interests me is the genetic manipulation, extra-dimensional creatures taking humans and trying to mix DNA. They did it once before. Maybe this is the last shot they have. The final kingdom is the one that held up the statue the whole time. We'll try one last time until the rock destroys the whole thing. Maybe aliens are a part of this. Maybe the Greys are strange genetic AI engineered creatures to collect DNA, watchers with large eyes. Maybe there is a return, but completely different because they cannot mingle anymore. As the days of Noah, Genesis says, Noah had to get drunk to forget about all of this. You might need a glass of wine as well. That was a hard chapter. Oh, man. There's a lot there. There's a whole lot there. And it's kind of funny because I kind of drop it at the end. It said Noah had to get drunk to forget about all this. After Noah came off the ark, it says he planted a vineyard and he made wine and he got drunk. It was like the first thing that it talks about him doing. Like he got ready. He was like, I'm going to forget all this. And I said, you might need a glass of wine as well. Yeah, this is a weird chapter. I could even tell I felt like it was weird when I wrote it, because as I'm reading it, I'm like, man, some of this stuff is hard to read. Yeah, and I think the important part of it is understanding that there's a story being told here. And the story is, this is part of that story. And when you remove a part of the story that you don't like and you think is weird, it kind of ruins the rest of the story. You find these passages later on in the Bible that talk about, God commanding Joshua and his army to, destroy, whole nations of people. And it's like, but then you have in the book of Enoch where God told the archangels to go down and destroy all the giants, So it's like a song. There's these beats, and each one of the beats are important, because Joshua wasn't destroying regular people. He was destroying Nephilim, and it even says it in when the spies were sent out to spy out the land of Canaan, said that we were grasshoppers in their sight. There were giants in the land. The Nephilim were there, and they have a lot of different other names for the different descendants, that were Nephilim. And it's interesting that one place that Joshua and Caleb did not finish, the spot of the promised land they didn't get to, ends up being, the Philistines, where Goliath and his brothers came from. So, and one of the things, a lot of people are like, well, what's keeping that from happening again? Well, if you're asking that question, you're kind of missing the point of the story. It's a story that's leading you to Jesus. Jesus defeated Satan, by dying on the cross and raising from the dead. When you start trying to make it something more, I think you miss the point. And that's why I kind of threw it in the end. It's people love to try to find ways to continue to tell the story. But the point of the story should lead you to the fact that from the very beginning, in the very beginning of the story, where Eve was promised that her seed would crush the head of the serpent, that no matter what seed that Satan created, whether it be, physical creatures like the giants, or when I say physical, I mean physical from the sense of the story, or, manipulating world leaders and, things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever that plan may be, it's crushed by Jesus, that Jesus is more powerful. The only king that ends up living through this all and being the one sitting on the throne in the end is King Jesus. So, hope you like that. Very weird. You can get a copy of my book at Amazon if you'd like to get a copy. I'll read another chapter next week. Thanks for checking out my video. Yeah, and this was the weirdest one. I think next week is definitely going to not be as weird, because I'm sorry, I don't even remember what the next chapter was. Isn't that bad? Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. It's interesting because every single one of these chapters I throw something in that I know is totally like, whoa. Like the last chapter, that I don't believe that any humans were destroyed in the flood, that was just all corruption from the Nephilim. The chapter before, when we talked about the devil, the whole idea that maybe Satan ate the fruit first before the humans did. There's always these weird little things I like to throw out there. I just want you to know it's just my opinion. It's things that I've read and I understand. I'm not, is that are you adding things to the Bible or something like that? No, I'm not. I love a story, and this is an amazing story, and I'm telling the story the way that I read it, and as close as I can to the way that the original people would have read it, and giving you my insights on it. So hopefully you're enjoying it. Tune in next week for some more. Have a great week.